Oh, okay.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, absolutely.
So like, and I think that there are other sorts of situations that are kind of confusing if free will is supposed to do all the explanatory work here. Like, for instance, when you have a murderer and their victim, right? It seems like when the murderer kills the victim, they're taking away their freedom, they're taking away their agency, right? They're literally killing them.
Mhm.
And so God sort of has to choose: do I allow it or do I not allow it? And if he allows it, because of free will, then he's siding with the agency of the murderer and not the victim.
Yeah, but Danny, let me respond to that by saying that that person that got offed, they could have done something to prevent that from happening. So it's not like they were set for that event to happen since they were a child. Maybe they should have carried pepper spray. Maybe they should have had a gun. Maybe they could have done something to prevent that from happening. So what I'm saying is everything in this world, that everything in this world could have been prevented, something else could have happened. So I wouldn't say that somebody murdering somebody else, yeah, in a sense they're removing their life, but I
Okay, but
wouldn't
let's say that God knows that there is going to be someone that murders another if he doesn't prevent it. Okay, so presumably you think God knows the future. Okay, so he has to make a decision. Okay, I know that if I don't intervene, this person will be shot, right? And that will take away their free will, their agency. And so God has to make a decision, right? Either he sides with the agency of the murderer or the agency of the victim. And so it'd be weird that if free will is what explains why he allows the murderer to do what they want, that he overlooks the agency or the free will of the victim.
Yeah,
right?
Danny,
1 minute left.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word overlook. I would say that God allows things to happen accordingly. So it's not that God is causing or anything like that. God is just allowing the world to play out as they will play out. And the Bible actually speaks of the consequences of murder because it is somebody taking somebody's life away and essentially taking everything with them, right? Like when you murder somebody, you are deleting everything in regard to their existence in this realm. And that is true. But I would say that God allowing the world to move forward and then judging people for what they do at the end, I wouldn't see that as a God being a failure or a problem to evil.
I think what I'm trying to do is respond to your opening statement, right? Because your opening statement, you brought in a free will theodicy, that like, hey, free will, this is why, this is it, okay? And so then the way I'm interpreting that is that let's take a Hutu murderer. So in Rwanda, there were the Tutsis and the Hutus. The Hutus massacred innocent families because they were of a different race. Okay, it was a genocide. So you have the shooter, right? The person with the person with the machetes, right? And you have the families. Okay, so all I'm saying is that I interpreted you as saying that God allows that to preserve the free will of the murderers, of the genociders, right? And okay, well, what about the free will of the victims? What about the agency of the victims? And it seems like you can have this kind of calculus in these cases where there's like equal amounts of free will that are at stake. And usually when it comes to genocides, it's lopsided, right? You usually have a few people that are killing and many people that are victims. And so it seems like if God really did care about free will, if that is the explanation you're going with, then he'd prevent the murderers from victimizing because of the amount of free will that would be preserved if he intervenes. And so if that's not the case, so then there's something other than free will that God has in mind.
So could I jump in with this real quick?
Actually, you know what? For the JP and Manny side, your time is up. And I would save it for the open discussion, Manny. We're going to let Lance and Danny have their cross-examination now. 10 minutes. Go ahead, fellas.
Yeah, but again, we're totally fine with you asking questions during our cross-exam. I think this could be I think we've been doing a good job of letting each other speak and stuff. So I'm not so sure if we need these formalities. But I was wondering what you thought about what I said.
Yeah, want to respond to that, Manny, or should I respond?
Yeah. So when you guys are going back and forth, it just hits me that we're talking about God's foreknowledge, right? That He sees all events, He sees everything at a glimpse from beginning to end, but He doesn't ordain any of that to happen. That's the understanding of His foreknowledge, right? So all those events before they occur, He sees it absolutely. But here's the thing: because we live in a dark world, right, and because we live where people get to choose to do evil, so that person who's murdering somebody, right? You're saying it almost seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I don't want to misquote you, that God is siding with one and not the other. Is not. It's because that we're in a dark world, and the absence of God is what making someone choosing to do harm to another person. If God was to intervene and stop somebody from doing something, now we just became His robot. We're puppets. He's just pulling us along. And if He does that, the free will contradicts free will in itself.
Okay, wait. So just to clarify, okay, so God, let's just stipulate these cases. Let's forget about God for a second. Let's take about you. Let's say you care the thing that you care about the most is free will. Okay, that's what you care about the most. Let's just pretend. Okay, you have one murderer and 10 potential victims. Okay, if you kill about free will, who would you kill? Who would you kill? The murderer, or would you kill the murderer, or would you allow the murderer to kill the 10 victims? Potential victims.
So we're taking God out of the equation. We're saying
I'm just asking you, if you're a person that cares about free will, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to stop the murderer by killing them, or are you going to allow the murderer to have his agency, his free will?
If exactly what you're saying, I'll explain why I would stop the murderer from harming the 10 people, right? But if we put God back in the equation, right? We're blaming God for something that we are doing.
I'm not blaming him. I'm just wondering.
I'm just saying, like,
all I want to know.
If I'm at war, like a military person, he's taken on fire, right? And he has a choice to react to save his people behind him. I'm sure I'm gonna react and take out that person, right? That's a better scenario.
To be clear,
right?
I'm not blaming God just yet. Okay. I'm wondering, what is God's reason for allowing the murderer to kill the 10?
Danny, I'll give you a response to that.
I'll give you one other thing why
Go ahead,
you're saying allow. He's not allowing it. He's given the free will to make that choice because of the absence of God that they had in their lives. When you have the absence of God in life, you do whatever pleases you, right? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. If I don't have God in my life, it doesn't matter today if I'm Mother Teresa I follow, or tomorrow I wake up and I decide to kill a bunch of people and not care.
Let me clarify something Manny said by allow. No, we believe God is allowing it by allowing creation to do what they do with their free will. Just a quick clarification. Okay.
Yeah, but by allow, I mean let happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the free will, and that if he had to stop that person, he's going to stop every single one of us, because for the most part, we sin against him. So then if we have to allow him to stop that, then he wouldn't allow us to live at all then, because we wouldn't be able to do anything. He would stop us in our tracks the minute we do something of sin. Okay, so where do we draw that line then?
This seems to be some kind of slippery slope. Let's just say that we're talking about a God that would allow any kind of sin except murder and rape. Okay. Those two he prevents, right? And but in our world, he doesn't. This kind of being doesn't exist, right? Because the Christian God, it seems, allows for murder and
so Danny, in the Christian worldview, the Christian God allows his creatures to do as they wish and they want to do, and God will hold them
not
accountable.
The victims. The victims are not able to do what they want.
But let me explain something to you, Danny.
Okay.
So yes, I understand that there are victims, and you're correct. There are victims, right? And the Bible talks about there being victims, right? The Bible even tells us and gives us ideas on how not to be a victim, right? For example, let me explain this to you, Danny, and then I'll let you rock. For example, Jesus told Peter to grab a sword. For what purpose? Because he didn't want Peter to end up being a victim. You see, there are bad scenarios, and then we have to get into this, because now we get into countries and we get into systemic things that have happened where we have free creatures. For example, we can talk about Venezuela, who they were once a democracy, and with their freedom, they chose to vote for a dictator. And as a result, now they're paying for the consequences of their actions. So now there are going to be kids that are starving. There are going to be people that are thrown into prisons because they oppose the government. So everything that happens in the grand scheme of things, right, it's because of free will. Even though in the micro level, right, you may say, oh, there's a victim, but in the macro level, something happened to get to that point. And if we trace this all the way back, we see that it's Adam who ate that fruit, and the consequences of humanity who have probably, right, like if we're going to go down that route, I would say not probably, but, you know, because every scenario is different. But perhaps maybe that woman that got murdered by her boyfriend was warned not to date that man. Right. So it's just a lot of circumstances. So, Danny, I would like an example. If you can give me an example, and then we can go down that route. But what I'm saying is every free will action begets a consequence from a macro level and a micro level.
I feel like I'm not being understood, because here's what I'm saying. Okay. You have a murderer and you have a potential set of victims. They both have a volition. They both have a will.
Correct.
One, the murderer wills to kill. The victim's will to live, right? And if you want to preserve the greatest amount of free will, it seems like you would side with the ones that have the will to live rather than the one that wills to kill.
Yeah,
because in preventing the murderer, you would conserve, I guess, a greater amount of free will. So all I'm trying to say is that free will can't be the all and be all in terms of why God allows things or prevent else going on.